but I gotta ask you, obviously, with all of the stuff going on in America and Ireland at the minute, a lot of riots over racism claims and stuff. Not that we're going to talk about serious political shit, but initially this September, the plan was for the release of the Many Saints of Newark, the Sopranos prequel film.
Well, I believe it's been postponed until 2021.
But that's actually the thing that I'd love to ask you about. Uh,
Yeah.
do you think that film's ever actually going to be released? Because it's about the race riots. And I don't think you can do a film about race without saying a certain word. And
Well, actually, I don't know much about it except that I believe the time frame will be 1968 in Newark, New Jersey. And yeah, at the time, organized crime was very strong in those days, especially in the state of New Jersey. And I think that possibly the racial unrest at the time would be somewhere in the storyline, but certainly it's what I believe to be more about the beginnings of the Soprano crime family. I would say that the unrest was probably something that was just part of the scenery at that time.
but I have this tremendous fear because not like I've like nobody wants to encourage all that shit. But if they're like what made The Sopranos so good is that it was realistic and they spoke like how people would behind closed doors. Like
Right.
if Tony Soprano and Johnny Sack was on the bus, they wouldn't have those conversations. But because they're behind closed doors, they're all this fucking cunt, this fucking guy, you know.
Right. Right.
So I'm just worried that for the sake of the legacy of the show, I think there's a chance this film's going to get completely what's the word PCified.
I'll tell you something. Knowing David Chase for so many years, going back to 1998, I mean, he's a prolific writer. I don't think anything influences him with regard to the current social norms, especially when you're going back to the late 60s. I'm assuming that the language and the expressions would be of the day. I don't see where he's the type of a man to acquiesce, especially when you're going back in time. I believe that the content will be authentic, and that if that includes language of a certain type, and if that includes opinions of a certain type, I would doubt that he would filter it in any way.
That was one of the things that really stuck out for me when I watched the last Scorsese film, The Irishman,
Right.
and that. So, are you see really trying to say that there's these guys during those days, and nobody made fun of like a gay guy once or a black guy once, and not that that's we need endless change of that, but I just thought,
Right.
especially if they're Irish.
I think that I saw the film. I only saw it once, The Irishman. It was a little bit too long for me. I could handle The Godfather at that length, but not this film. Um, it was in my opinion, it was very slow. Some tremendous performances. Joe Pesci, especially, very underplayed character. I think he was wonderful. Um, I don't know. When you go back in time in the history of this country, I mean, if you go back to the 1960s, the Rat Pack days, Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. and whatever. I mean, these guys were up on stage. They said just about anything they wanted to say, and people either laughed or walked out of the showroom. But there were no riots about whatever they may have said that may have offended a certain faction of the population. This is where we get into. I think it was I think it was the Washington Post who interviewed me many years ago when the show was on the air and said, "Well, this is a slur against Italian Americans." I said, "No, no, this wasn't made up. This is a fictitious account of a subculture that does exist in the United States of America, along with Sicily, along with Calabria in Italy." The reporter said to me, he says, "But it's a little over the top." I said, "Well, change the channel. You don't just have HBO, do you? You must have other channels. Just change the channel. But I did say to him, I said, did you ever take a field trip to Arlington National Cemetery outside of Washington, D.C.? Oh, yeah, when I was a kid, I went. I said, you see all the headstones of all the people who fought so that we can have freedom of expression? Have you forgotten this? We're free to express ourselves. You don't have to listen to it. You don't have to watch it. But it is about freedom of, especially artistic expression. So,
But yeah,
yeah.
no, you're completely right. And the thing that worries me is, it just say the Sopranos was made today. In fact, this goes for any TV show being made today. Even the fucking Game of Thrones or Walking Dead that has dragons and zombies, and it has to be politically correct.
Yeah.
Like if Sopranos is made today, I actually wrote this down. Tony Soprano would be a vegan black dwarf going through a sex change. And actually, I think that's not a bad idea for a show. Are you interested?
No, it's not a bad idea for a show. But I think what you're asking me is, if it was in production today, being written today, would it change because of the political climate? I have to say again, knowing David Chase, I don't believe so. I believe it would be whatever would be needed with regard to language or opinion of those characters. I do not believe he would hesitate to use it.